India and UK have strong relationship. There are a lot of things to be celebrated about. There might be certain concerns, which of course every good relationship has. With me is UK's Minister of State, Lord Tariq Ahmad. So welcome to WION and welcome to India as well. And my first question to you is an obvious question. Your India visit. What's the key focus during your India visit? You, of course, met with the Indian External Affairs Minister and other top officials as well. If you can talk about those meetings as well.
Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you for inviting me on. And being here in Delhi is sort of stop 3, actually, of my tour. I stopped briefly in Mumbai, where I was updated by our Trade Commissioner and Deputy High Commissioner in Mumbai on the FTA negotiations, which has been a key part of what I was discussing, including with Foreign Minister Jaishankar ji earlier today. I then went to Jodhpur, where there was a real focus on important issues of meeting with empowered women leaders, also seeing some incredible projects which are empowering women and girls in rural communities around Rajasthan. And there was also an opportunity to see a real deliverable of the UK India friendship and partnership, where I visited one of the clinics that benefited also from the strong support we were able to give in terms of oxygen factory provisions and oxygen utilities in terms of Rajasthan's need during the COVID crisis. Here today in Delhi, I've had very constructive conversations with my long-standing friend. I've known Jaishankar ji a long time. He's a great asset to India as Foreign Minister, but he's also a great friend to the United Kingdom. And we discussed a wide range of issues with the celebrations around the G20, and we congratulate India in that respect. Halfway through, as the report card says, and that I was also able to meet Amitabh ji as the Sherpa on the G20, and also my great and dear friend Shringla ji, who also oversees many of the arrangements. Equally, having a very strong meeting and a constructive exchange with the Foreign Secretary, Kwatra ji, and with all of these individuals, and indeed with the Home Secretary. We had discussions on the wide range of issues, the FTA I've mentioned, the G20, the importance of the strength of the UK bilateral partnership, but also on how we collaborate together on important issues, as we did around the COVID crisis. So all in all, it's been a focused visit on these key deliverables. But underlying all of this is the importance of science and technology partnerships to the United Kingdom and India. And indeed, just before joining you for this interview, we were just celebrating a whole range of innovative health entrepreneurs who've been looking at cutting-edge AI technology and delivering health outcomes in terms of early diagnostics, but also practical solutions which will revolutionize healthcare. And I'm proud to say that of the 6 winners, they'll be traveling to the United Kingdom as part of a funded project from the UK to see how we can strengthen cooperation across the healthcare sector.
So you mentioned about India-UK FTA. If you can give an update on the FTA. In fact, my office has sent a report saying that why the British side refusing to accept the plea of the Indian spirit makers in India to reduce the maturity age of whiskey. Is the government afraid of losing the Scottish brand? If you can just talk about this technical aspect regarding the FTA.
Well, first of all, the FTA is progressing well. And my colleague, Kemi Badenoch, who's the Trade Secretary, is engaged with Minister Goyal on important aspects of this. And you pose a very technical question on spirits, and you pose it to a teetotaler, someone who doesn't touch alcohol. So I can't say I declare an interest. What, though, is important for sectors and industries, but also companies on both sides, to be not just protected, but to be provided with opportunities to expand further. And that's the essence. And to sort of use a phrase, the spirit, if I may, of the FTA. So there will be details that our various officials are working on currently, but we're making good progress. Several chapters have progressed and been closed, and we remain hopeful on reaching an early agreement. It's important, the FTA, the framework that it sets across different sectors is an important sense of collaboration between our two countries, and it's a key deliverable of our partnership. But notwithstanding, whilst those negotiations continue, as I've already illustrated through the example of these entrepreneurs, and as I've seen already, in a time when we needed a friend, India stood with us. When India needed a friend, we stood with India, and that's how you define a true partnership and friendship.
But overall, how will you characterize India-UK relationship perhaps in this year, a year which has seen a lot of ups. Both the Prime Ministers met just last week in Hiroshima, but also downs as well, with the Indian High Commission being vandalized. So how will you characterize this relationship?
First of all, every friendship and partnership, indeed any relationship we have of humankind, is defined by good days and days which could have gone better. But the United Kingdom and India's relationship is in a very strong place, and that's demonstrable by the strong relationship, both professionally and personally, between our two Prime Ministers. You saw the strong sense and the communique that came out of the meeting they had. It wasn't just warm words, there were some very practical deliverables, and indeed both Prime Ministers stated their ambition to deliver upon what we were just talking about, the free trade agreement. You mentioned the issue of the attack on the High Commission, and it was deplorable. Let me be absolutely clear. We take the security of India, indeed the security of every mission in the United Kingdom, to the Court of St. James extremely seriously. It is our responsibility. I immediately visited your excellent High Commissioner in India, as did the Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat, to ensure that the response, indeed showing solidarity, but importantly the response that was needed, is stood up very quickly. And we have security provisions in place. We're also looking at added security structures within the framework of the diplomatic mission. But I assure you that the UK takes all these responsibilities very seriously, because these are very much the representatives of different governments on the soil of the UK, and we need to ensure they're fully protected. And I'm sure if you speak to the High Commissioner, etc., he's been reassured also by the steps and practical steps we've taken in this regard.
But in terms of the Khalistani extremism in UK, how much it is a concern for you? I mean, do you see it as a threat to the British society as well? And if yes, any actions being thought about by the British government?
Well, first and foremost, we need to really unpack this. Any form of extremism is a challenge. It's a challenge to the society in which it is being practiced. It's a challenge beyond, and it has ramifications. We've suffered, as has India, from the whole onset of extremism of different kind. But we've got to be very clear. First and foremost, there's often religion is associated with extremism. Never can be there more erroneous link established. There is no religion that justifies violent actions against another on the basis of difference of opinion. Let's be absolutely clear about that. I was a former minister for countering extremism in the United Kingdom, and we must tackle that extremist ideology, which then sometimes infiltrates vulnerable minds or communities, and address it head on. You mentioned about pro-Khalistan extremists. Any kind of extremist is to be condemned. There are, of course, laws and structures, and the law of allowing people the right to peaceful protest, to demonstrate a particular view or opinion, is celebrated in any democracy. It's celebrated here in India, it's celebrated in the United Kingdom. But those who demonstrate a particular point of view, it may be contrarian to a particular country or a particular issue, must do so within the parameters of that law. That was overstepped. And we must ensure that there is no space for those who tout extremism. That extremism leads to division, it leads to discord, it leads to hatred, and worse. And yes, when you talk of extremism and those who challenge the very fabric of democracy, whether it's India and the United Kingdom, it's a common challenge we must face and address.
Sir, you mentioned about the security measures which have been taken for the Indian High Commission. Can you assure that there will be no such instances of vandalization? Because this is perhaps 6th or 7th, according to media reports, instance of vandalization. But if I can recall, this is second time since 2019 that there have been attempts to vandalize the Indian mission.
Well, I think, first of all, as I said earlier, everyone has a right to protest, a right to demonstrate, but they must do so within the parameters of the law. And when you overstep that mark, there's action to be taken, both against the perpetrators of those actions, which we do, but equally to show how we can mitigate further actions that may be taken. When you talked about the extremist threat, or even more sinister than that, the security threats, the terror threats we often face around the world, you can never eradicate it, because these extremist minds, whether they're preying on vulnerable communities, individuals, whatever their approach, they will be always looking at means to circumvent what is there. We need to ensure, one, cooperation, secondly, that the measures we take to mitigate further actions act as a direct deterrent to those who are planning these actions. But where the law is overstepped, we will ensure that there are prosecutions.
So now coming to Indo-Pacific, we know about UK's Indo-Pacific tilt. How do you see India playing an important role when it comes to London's Indo-Pacific tilt? If you can shed some light on that.
Well, first of all, in celebrating the G20 leadership of India, you will have a very it's a bit of a conveyor belt of ministers arriving who've already come to India during the course of this year, and I believe there's another 7 or 8 planning before the year's end. Our strength of our partnership, our friendship is linked on something which I feel very passionate about, is our people-to-people links. As Prime Minister Modi often says, the living bridge. We're demonstrable of that living bridge. The contributions of the British Indian community are not just recognized, indeed they're celebrated, and you see people of the heritage from this part of the world very much evident in every facet of British society, with every profession, including the profession that I represent in public life. However, it's also important that we look at new innovations, new ways of moving forward. I talked about the FTA, technology, AI, research, partnerships, the fact during crisis, what we saw during COVID with the cooperation between AstraZeneca and the Serum Institute, which has now resulted in a major investment on research facilities in the UK. That is a deliverable of the living bridge. So our ambition on both countries, I know, is very high. And of course, in saying all of that, by not just saying words, but specifics that are taking place and will take place, India is very much part and heart of our Indo-Pacific tilt.
But in the Indo-Pacific, we have seen aggressive actions by certain countries, which includes China, in India's northern borders. How do you see this aggressive action by China with India, with other countries in the region as well? Because we have seen contestation in the region.
Well, you may recall when those skirmishes broke out in the north of the region around Ladakh, etc. I was one of the few ministers quite publicly, and as representing my country, the United Kingdom, to call out support for India in terms of its territorial sovereignty and integrity. India is an important partner. You mentioned China and the threat it poses. Let's be very clear, as the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly has also said, we recognize China has an important role to play. It's a P5 member on the UN Security Council. It has an important role, as it demonstrated when it comes to dealing with pandemics, as we saw during the COVID-19 crisis. We talk, as we're talking at the G20, about climate change and its impact on communities across the world. And in all these, China has a role and a responsibility. We recognize that. But however, where we have differences with China, where we see China needs to be called out publicly, we don't hesitate to do so. But our partnership with India, our collaboration with India as two functioning democracies, pluralist democracies, inclusive democracies, democracies that represent a rich diversity of people and communities, is reflective of our ambition to do so much more.
So last question before I let you go, on perhaps a lighter note, any plans to return the Kohinoor, something that we have seen strongly being talked about here in India? Any debate in UK about it?
Well, the thing is, it's part of, yes, I recognize the history of it, but it's very much part of our heritage, so there's no plans in that respect. But what we also recognize is the strong cultural ties and the importance of issues of a shared heritage. We have a living bridge, and that living bridge is the real heritage is the people. And when you look at our country, and perhaps I don't need to go no further than our own Prime Minister right now, you see the living bridge and the true heritage of what we celebrate in the United Kingdom. And as we look forward to a flourishing partnership and deepening friendship with India, God willing, we will be very much strengthening our work across all sectors and all areas. And it's important to look at the here and now. As my late father, who was, by the way, never late, but always, God bless his soul, used to say to me, focus on the present, because it's the present that defines our future. And for me, the future between India and the UK is a bright one.
Well, thank you so much, sir, on that note, for speaking to WION. And of course, this is a visit which is being closely watched, given that how it is a visit that is coming after a long time and something that celebrates the relationship. Thank you so much, sir.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.